Hey guys, we actually have a live StarCraft history coming at you, and it's actually going to be our first look into some Brood War history. So I'm going to kind of try and do a whole just journey from the year 1998 all the way up to, well, I guess now, but with probably less emphasis on the post-2012 era, which would have been after Proleague turned into StarCraft 2 and Brood War. But I hope you guys enjoy it. We were talking about some of the very first forays into what we would know as esports, right? Because it became so huge in South Korea that one could even argue that no other esport really has still matched it in terms of its popularity and its almost cultural, getting ingrained culturally. Like some, obviously a lot of these sports are now very popular in Korea, and League of Legends gets sold out venues and all that type of stuff. But yeah, Brood War was pretty freaking special. Certainly doing it at a time where really no other esport was hitting the same peak. We did have, Counter-Strike still involved. I'm sure people were playing Quake and Unreal. We had smaller scenes. We still had the fighting scene that was mostly very local, but still obviously a lot of places had their local scene and eventually would come together for some LAN or whatever. But nothing ever really hit Brood War's popularity until, I guess, the next set of esports really was developed, which would have been after StarCraft 2 and after Twitch was developed. So we're talking pre-Twitch, pre-StarCraft 2. We're talking about accessibility to live streaming as well. So this is not people streaming from their own setups, right? This is actually immediately going into more of a TV production setup. And Brood War was displayed on television. It also did have its issues with rights to display on television. Eventually, Blizzard paid attention to Brood War and went like, what are you guys doing over there? And it caused a whole thing, which we could still even feel some repercussions of with Blizzard's control over their broadcasting rights. But I think that probably requires its own video. So if that sounds like juicy drama, it kind of is, but we'll hold off on it. First, I want to take us to a 1998 game, or as close as possible to a 1998 game, which is actually quite difficult to find because it would have only been displayed on like Korean channels, and then who actually bothered to save it? No one really. So you can see I typed in Brood War 1998. Brood War was being cast by, I think, like immediately after it got popular, which was around late 98 and early 99. But you can see the farthest back we can actually get is 2000. But let's go ahead and take a look at the 2000s. And what we're also going to be able to see is one of the earlier best foreigners to enter into the scene. And that guy is Grrr. So let's full screen this one. Let's see how this looks. We do have amazing quality, but you can see the year 2000, and we can see some of what I'm so excited to display. I'm so excited to, like, guys, look at this stuff, all right? All right, so the background, StarCraft 1, Brood War has been out for about, 2 years, basically, and it has already exploded in Korea. It does have a lot of fans overseas, but less so about like an esport, more just people who loved the video game. I'm sure a lot of us played a lot of Brood War. But then the actual ability for people to compete against each other was limited to those who had good enough internet and, enough savvy, I suppose, to also navigate the internet back in the year 2000, which, if you guys remember, probably wasn't a whole lot of people. Even people who were interested in, computers and the growing internet phenomenon we're still pretty detached from this idea of esports. So the fact that a foreigner, again, so a non-Korean, because they're just so rare that we just call them all foreigners, would actually be able to almost immediately jump into professional Brood War made sense in the idea that no one was really all that good. So the bar was kind of low in the very beginning, you could argue, but then doesn't make sense in the context of how many people were really set up to learn about this, to learn about online competitive video games, that people could win money from it, and that there was a country called South Korea that was heavily interested in it. Because also keep in mind, unlike the year 2023, where we're long past Gangnam Style, and we're truly into almost everyone knowing that South Korea is a hip, cool, metropolitan city with soul. This was years ago. They would probably still, from a lot of people, if you asked your dad or whatever, like, oh, what is with South Korea? It's a 1998 You're 7 years old and you're like, what's South Korea? Your dad would probably be like, I have no idea. They'd be like, well, I guess there was a war there. And they really wouldn't know a whole lot about it. Japan obviously had its kind of, like, I don't know, heyday is not the right word, but obviously it really infiltrated the Western world culturally, as we did have a lot of Japanese-made products. We had the Karate Kid. We had the onset of Japanese food and sushi becoming quite popular. China was always, I guess, more well known about, but South Korea was like just like this really like what is that even place? Especially because consider that up until the 80s, South Korea was actually a dictatorship. Very recently, I guess, in the context of history. So you can also imagine that anyone who tells their parents, well, I'm going to go be a pro gamer in South Korea, I mean, it just wouldn't compute, right? Like, it'd just be like, what? I don't understand. But somehow a couple of people did get into it. And one of those guys was named Grrrr ... And he was, I believe, from Montreal. I believe he's French Canadian. And he actually is here. That's him. Amazing. Oh, love the style. Love it. More frosted tips, please. I think that's the way to go. Oh, that chat's huge. Sorry, guys. But I think that's the way we need to bring this back. And then also notice, this is not them. This is not the 90s style. The haircut absolutely is. Abso-freaking-lutely on the, oh yeah, Korean boy band haircut as well back in the 90s, early 2000s. But the reason that they're set up like in spacesuits is because they thought that this would be appealing. So like, it's just so hilarious, okay? Like, they really thought that this would be appealing, that this would, like, hook people in, because it'd be like, oh, it's science fiction-y, it's futuristic, people competing in video games, oh my goodness. So they put them in spacesuits. Like, and these spacesuits are actually even a bit less extreme than, I think, the other spacesuits that would happen. Brood War in 1998, Korea, I don't know if we can actually get it. But there's images of some of the earliest Brood War players in their spacesuit, which I can't find immediately right off the bat, but I do know that I have it somewhere because I did it. I showed it to my StarCraft 2 class when I was teaching at a university, but yeah, I can't find it here. But I have the picture somewhere. But the spacesuits were elaborate. Then they kind of like a little bit less elaborate, like you can see with these two guys. Like, when I say elaborate, I mean like chrome. You know? Oh, did you find it? Ah, yes. Excellent. Excellent. I love it. Shout out to the good old days when men were men and StarCraft players took the stage in spacesuits. So that's what I'm talking about. That was the first thing that these poor pro gamers had to deal with. And, I mean, who even is that? I don't even know. There we have another foreigner. I'm actually not sure who that is. I don't think it's Grrrr. Oh my god, look at their little introduction. They're wearing like Super Saiyan capes. They're like coming from the planet Vegeta. Brilliant. Continuing with 90s haircuts and stupid spacesuits. And then I don't know when they stopped, but I'm imagining they stopped at least like 2002, I have to imagine, but we might find out here today. So yeah, love the spacesuits. That's why they're doing this, is because it was actually kind of like a hook. And it was stupid, and I don't think they found it particularly engaging, but it was the thing for a little while. And then the bitrate's amazing, awesome stuff. To actually find the streams that were bothering to rebroadcast this was borderline impossible. So what you would do is you wouldn't be able to look up this video and know about this video mostly. If you got into Brood War around, let's say, 2008, maybe before the betting scandal, so before 2008, but still around that time, you probably weren't watching any of these videos that I have up here. You might eventually have access to like GOM TV and the GOM player, and you might be able to fork over money to people who are actually trying to streamline this more often. But most of the time, you were being given these either super crappy, like not even 240p, like 120 or whatever else is lower. And then if you still couldn't figure out what the hell was going on because it was like the blurriest shit ever, you would go to Team Liquid and you would go to live report threads. So some of you might already know about Team Liquid live report threads and say, oh yeah, well, okay, they just go and discuss that? Live report threads used to actually be more aptly named. In fact, I don't think they even call them live report threads so much anymore. Hold on. Getting a little bit sick, I guess. Anyways, but they used to be called live report threads because that's literally what they were. They were a live report. People would watch and decipher what was going on, or sometimes people would actually be in Korea and they were, you know, either foreigners visiting or Koreans who could speak English, and they would help the community. So they'd be typing in the live report threads, you know, Jaedong spawns here and Bisu spawns there, and then this happened at this minute and this happened at that minute. It actually legitimately was a live report thread, and that existed up until probably, I want to say, like 2015 might have been some of the last actual live report threads that I've seen where people bothered commented with live report thread for some of the last episodes of Pro League. And now no one does it. No one does it. The term live report thread is kind of old school, all that good stuff. But that's what people were doing. So you would probably meet even a handful of people who, unless they bothered going back to search up some of these videos, might be retelling you what happened because they read about it, not because they heard it. They may have even listened to it, but even the concept of like a radio broadcast was still not, you know, it wasn't rampant. You know, you maybe could find DJ Wheat's radio broadcasts of some game. But again, you had to be really deep into the scene and really savvy about the internet and just actually know what the heck esports was, which I certainly didn't know until StarCraft 2. And the internet, as we know it, kind of just got easier to figure out, right? So really, really fond memories, I would say, but I wasn't even around for this time. It's fascinating nostalgia and memories of a time past where the internet was different than what it is now. So that's always so fun. So let's move on into the actual match. We could check out actually how they played. So I talked about in my previous videos about how StarCraft 2 came out at a time where Brood War was basically perfected. It was amazing. The production was, they knew what they wanted to produce. They knew the storylines. They had the established teams. They had a team league and multiple 1v1 leagues. They played an amazing wide-scale battle where the games would easily go over half an hour and be constant battle action. And then you got StarCraft 2 and it looked like shit, right? Because it was like one base versus one base and it was over in 5 minutes. Brood War also started off that way. Any video game, anything competitive is going to start off that way, where we look back in time and we go, oh my god, these guys were bad. Same thing for Brood War. So yeah, no way that Grrrr could just come back in 2023 and have any idea as to what the meta is or how to play this game. He has done a couple of show matches because Grrrr actually would go on to become a very public figure in South Korea. Ended up staying in South Korea after his pro gaming career and leveraged his, I guess, somewhat famous status as a very good foreigner Brood War player, which even at this time was already getting him to a certain celebrity status. And then he would leverage that to go on to become what we would call, like, I guess, a more legitimate celebrity, I guess. But he'd go on Korean talk shows because he learned Korean. And you can still see him on some Korean talk shows. And he's still so insanely popular that one time I got to meet him at the StarCraft Remastered launch in Busan in South Korea. And obviously a lot of StarCraft people were excited, but even the waiters were excited at the place that was hosting this. Everyone saw Grrrr come in, and it was like they were reacting to seeing Brad Pitt or someone come in. So that's pretty cool for him. He's been very, very successful, but he did start off as a Brood War pro gamer. And then we have the 2000 Hanaro OSL, H.O.T-Forever versus Grrrr, Space Odyssey being the map name, and this grand final set 1. They would often have a title sponsor name the OSL or the ESL or even the Pro League, I believe. So it'd always be like sponsor name, tournament name. And OSL, someone tell me what it stands for. Star League, On Game Net Star League, right? Was probably the most prestigious. I'm not sure about the money, to be honest. I've actually never really considered how much money was in Brood War competition. But I assume they played for a prize pool, as well as, of course, all the sponsorships and getting on a team and all that good stuff. But it was by far the most prestigious. If you won OSLs, if you won multiple OSLs, that was considered better than, for instance, winning multiple MSLs. It's kind of like winning multiple DreamHack international tournaments versus winning maybe the DreamHack regionals. Not quite that difference, but maybe back in the day, it's like winning the Intel Extreme Masters versus winning one of the weekend MLGs, maybe. Like, it just, there was a difference, even though both were very well-established tournaments. OSL, MSL, both the 1v1 typical tournament structure, and then Pro League which was the team league that was the longest running esports tournament, I think, until GSL knocked it off its pedestal because Proleague disbanded. Anyways, so we can see that they're 1v1. We don't have any of the nice production that would eventually happen, such as saying, you know, top left or P11, I guess, versus Z7. I'm very out of the habit of doing clocks, to be honest. It is what it is. So you would see that this mostly one base. We do surprisingly have Corsairs flying things. And apparently it goes into a somewhat two base, but I'm certain there's not many drones. Overlord drop of Hydralisks. All right, then. We can actually listen to a little bit of the commentary because it should be also in Korean. And you can hear what they were doing. Mass Corsair versus a mass Overlord drop. How does that? Is it an island map? I'm not certain. You might be right. This might be an island map. So the Mutas distracted all the Corsairs. And the Overlords come in. This thing knows no High Templars. These poor zealots. This game apparently continues on for another like 20 minutes. How about that? After the Overlord drop. So they do actually end up expanding, but still not comparable to what would eventually be Brood War perfected. So what else we can get into here? We can get into maybe some Jaedong versus Flash storytelling. About halfway into the video, so maybe I should go ahead and speed it up. So we should probably speed it up. We should probably go ahead and jump to some of the best rivalries that were going to happen in Brood War. So Brood War probably is still most well known for like Jaedong versus Flash, and maybe you guys would know about Savior, and of course that Flash dominates. Well, even up until he went to the military and got involved in a cryptocurrency scandal. But anyways, you might know Jaedong versus Flash, exceptionally popular matchup. Both of them displaying the peak of their respective races. Jaedong coming in as a master of ZVZ when everyone considered ZVZ to be literally a coin flip, 50% chance of winning or losing. Jaedong came in and had like a 90% win record in it. Flash initially coming in as a bit of a cheesy kid, but then perfecting his macro and being known as the best player in the world. And both of them would face each other quite often. There was one tournament they played in where there was a very, very, very infamous power outage. So there was no way to salvage the situation because they were on LAN, but it was a power outage, and we didn't have recover from replay in Brood War. So that was a thing that happened, but they were definitely one of the peak rivalries of the scene. But if you weren't really into Brood War, you wouldn't know that there was perhaps other storylines. For instance, how BoxeR ended up becoming one of the most well-known figures in esports overall. Maybe less so now, because obviously a lot of people would know Faker, for instance. But at the time, BoxeR was one of the first super celebrities of esports. Grrr was just, you know, a cute white guy, so that was kind of not a gimmick, but it was unique. BoxeR was just so powerful and so dedicated to the game, and he helped create multiple teams. That's why he was considered, well, of course, one of the best players initially, but then also one of the most influential esports people in the world. So unfortunately, can't find too much about the BoxeR. We could try and find Brood War BoxeR. He's very well known for having highlights, for instance, and bunker rushing people. He was a microer more than a macroer. And he would often bunker rush Yellow, who was the first second place cursed player. Yellow would always get second place, and he would often, I guess, get it against BoxeR. So there used to be just like right on top. I'm just dumb. Sorry. People used to make, because it's, you know, also the early 2000s, the early internet. So I'm sure you guys watch a lot of highlight montages of your favorite video game. But they did that with Brood War, of course, as well. So he invented a lot of stuff. He perfected a lot of micro that we now know as very basic micro. And he's still fun to watch, but now he's into poker and kind of just like living off his previous fame. He does play Brood War occasionally, but he fell off pretty hard in terms of skill of Brood War. Fell off pretty hard in the grand context of all the years that Brood War happened, but I guess, he did perform very well for years. But then his lack of macro ability really started to shine. He would eventually be a coach and a mentor to his almost replacement. And I can't remember the exact order of it, so I'm gonna have to look up Wikipedia here and see if they did it. He trained oh man, who was it? Not Nada, right? First it was someone else, wasn't it? And I can't remember who it is. Shoot. And they don't have him. They just have his rivalry. But he ended up forming together the team SKT1, or helping to get involved in forming that team. He then went to the military and formed Air Force Ace. He convinced the Air Force to go ahead. Thank you. He convinced the Air Force to go ahead and make a team. And then he would go on to make Slayers, which was his original name. His original actual name was Slayers BoxeR. Thank you. I Love Uv. I Love Uv was his first disciple, I suppose. And I Love Uv would take all of the things that BoxeR would train him for and then add a lot of improved macro to it. So I Love Uv was the next generation of like dominant Korean Terrans. And then after him, I believe, was Nada. People consider that kind of the chain of perfection until we eventually get to Flash, I suppose. So that's pretty cool. And BoxeR, there's a lot of other more influential things to talk about, but as much as I would just love to watch that highlight video, I probably can't just go ahead and fit that entire thing in. So check out the BoxeR highlight video if you've got some time. Otherwise, yeah, he did things like the marine splits against lurkers, micro them around. He did tank drops. He made the medevac, or rather, sorry, the dropship very popular. He did this thing where he allied mines. He would ally against his opponent in the option, and then he would unally as the army of his opponent walked over his spider mines, which then was deemed illegal, of course, but it wasn't illegal until he did it. He abused a command center bug where you could lift and land on top of interceptors from carriers, which was also banned after he did it. So yeah, he just, well, he's a bit of a cheeky guy, I suppose. So anyways, BoxeR, and then I Love Uv, and then Nada. There's all these names that would come forward. You might hear a lot about Reach if you start getting into a lot of Brood War history. Jelizerg, I want to say Lenok, but no, Jelizerg, also very influential, very much a muta micro perfector, I guess. Yeah. And then we get into more of like what was at one point called the modern era, I suppose, which had the likes of Savior and Bisu and Jaedong and Flash, who would still be probably the most recognizable names in Brood War. But if you were to start watching Brood War right here today in 2023, would no longer be dominating the ASL as the current Brood War tournament. They do okay, but they definitely don't dominate it. And well, one of the reasons you might know the name Savior is not necessarily because he was a very strong player, which he absolutely was, but rather because of the match-fixing scandal. Savior and Life, if you did follow StarCraft 2 back when Life was found out to be a match-fixer, were actually very parallel to each other. There was a lot of oddities that compared the two. First of all, they had kind of ironic names to end up being the things that helped kill their scene. Savior helped kill the Brood War scene, and then Life helped kill the StarCraft 2 scene. Amazing. They're both Zergs. Both known as being almost like, I don't know if savant's an okay word to use, but like basically just geniuses of their time and innovators, the way that they were improving how Zerg was playing. And in particular, Savior would eventually be known as an almost unbeatable player in all the matchups, and people predicted him to win MSL finals. This is one of the coolest stories that happened in Brood War. But the story is Savior had not been found out to be a match fixer as of yet. He's pretty much guaranteed to win MSL. He gets to the finals against this kind of upstart kid. Like, this guy hasn't actually really made all that much of a name for himself, and his name is Bisu. But of course, people are like, you know, muttering to themselves, like, wow, this kid got this far. Like, how is he going to perform against Savior? He's going to get bopped, right? And then Bisu would reveal what would dominate the Brood War meta for, up until now, maybe, he revealed the Corsair Dark Templar style. Before that, that wasn't actually a thing. And so Bisu arrives to a finals with this strategy in his pocket that he doesn't have to reveal because there are so few games played outside of professional tournament games. It's not like StarCraft 2 where there's a tournament or a small cup that you can find all your favorite players in. Every day, every week, you got StarCraft on a schedule. And people were very secretive of their strategies. They would actually straight up just like blackball people who would release team replays. Just kick them out. Just like, you're never allowed to play again. So no one knew about this. There was no like one commentator who cast to 20 people on their Twitch channel who's like, I know what Bisu's gonna do. No one knew. He comes in, people are like, Savior's gonna win. And then he shows off Corsairs killing overlords, which are detectors in Brood War, and then hitting the drone line with DTs. And it's so abusive, it sounds memey and cheesy because imagine the equivalent in StarCraft 2, Phoenix is killing off overseers to get DTs in, but it works. It actually works so freaking well that, like I said, it ends up still being a strategy, a very legitimate strategy, even up until 2023. So that's one of the coolest storylines in Brood War. No one had any idea this was going to happen, and then Bisu ends up winning. Shortly after this, Savior would be outed as a match fixer, and I believe they do have a list of games that he match fixed. This was not one of them, just in case anyone's kind of thinking along that direction. Savior and his betrayal of Brood War would be a tremendous blow to the scene. Many sponsors would consider pulling out. He dragged, of course, younger pro gamers into his scheme. He was very much designated, determined to be the gang leader, basically, convincing younger people that they could trust him because he's older, he's to be trusted, and that they could make more money doing this instead of trying to become a very good Brood War player, which didn't really get you very much money until you were literally at his level. And he gave a little sob story, too, when he was finally outed about how, like, it's just so tough being a pro gamer and, you know, all the pressure and all that. And then people would find pictures of him going to like theme parks, and he'd be wearing a very expensive watch, you know, a watch worth like $10,000. And so he just he had, no one felt bad for him. No one felt bad for him. No one believed his sob stories. Everyone blamed him for a direct impact to the Brood War scene, a possible crumbling of the scene as well. It was that impactful. Casters would go on to their own little like YouTube videos, or if they could live stream, I suppose. Like they had talk shows basically where the production crew would go to a Korean barbecue joint and they'd have a talk show. And there's, I think, a video of one of the commentators saying that he hates him and just being so emphatic. Just like, I hate him. He ruined everything. He's going to kill us. Like he's going to kill the Brood War scene. And Brood War did take a hit, but it was on its road to recovery. So then StarCraft 2 comes out in 2010. The match fixing scandal happened about 2008, and people were basically worried that Brood War would be like 1-2 punched, right? Like first the match fixing scandal and now this new game. Didn't quite happen, but Brood War would eventually fall off because StarCraft 2 and Blizzard in particular would force Brood War to stop being played. So Savior didn't really impact that aspect of why Brood War stopped being the dominant game in Korea. Well, the most professionally broadcasted and orchestrated game in Korea. But it did start, I guess, people doubts about esports, and certainly didn't help, I suppose, their case when Blizzard was like, how about you stop? And they're like, well, Brood War's still really popular, so how about no? And then Blizzard was like, well, how about that Savior thing? How's that going for you? And then Korean StarCraft would be like, that's a low blow. That's messed up, man. And obviously that would happen to StarCraft 2 anyways later. So anyways, kind of just to summarize, Savior, a very good player, faces against Bisu. Bisu surprise kills him. Eventually, Savior's found out to be a match fixer and the leader of the match fixing scandal, and he gets blackballed as many other people did. I believe he did go into, I believe he got jail time. I believe so. Ends up eventually getting out or whatever it is, and actually streams a lot on Chinese streaming services, which is very, very controversial. And the possibility of him being invited to tournaments is also extremely controversial. I believe a Chinese tournament did want to invite him, and it was yeah, heavily debated. So that gets us back up to about 2008. We got 2009, again, the kind of recovery after the Brood War scandal and people wondering if it was going to be okay. We still have OSL, MSL, and Pro League being the major tournaments, with GOM.TV eventually just full on going into StarCraft 2. They were doing some Brood War tournaments, but then StarCraft 2 came out and they were like, well, this is our chance, let's go for it. So we have the GOM.TV GSL for a long time. And then Brood War just kind of does its thing for Korea. It doesn't make any, you know, attempt to get into the international market, to use this upcoming thing called Twitch. It stays on its television shows. It stays on its, you know, same broadcasting and scheduling and just ecosystem that it did from 2001 or 2002, whatever you want to say. And it worked out for them okay. Pro League was still insanely popular. Pro League was still great. This is 11 years ago, so that would be 2011, right? 2011, 2012. And we still have a lot of people being very excited to watch Pro League. And Pro League was probably the most prestigious. I know I said OSL was probably the most prestigious, but I think that just was compared to MSL. If you won multiple OSLs, you were better than someone who won multiple MSLs. But Pro League and giving it all for your team was considered to be the most important thing. So that made the competition very fierce. People loved cheering for teams. And the teams would be very, very big sponsors, such as SK Telecom, who's literally a telecom company. KT and SKT at the time, I suppose now they're called, what, SK or whatever? Whatever. Literally the two telecoms you have choices of when you go to Korea. Like, literally. Samsung is literally Samsung. So they were Samsung Con and then Samsung Oz or whatever. And we had... who else do we have? CJ Entis is a like food company, like the dominating food company. If you know anything about Korean politics or culture, whatever you want to call it, you might know of the Kana Galaxy, thank you. But you might know that there's this thing called like chobles, where basically the Korean system is set up that, what, like 10 whatever number of companies actually dominate every aspect of Korean business. Well, a lot of them sponsored Pro League, which is great. You know, the whole like monopoly and unethical business practices aside, they've sponsored StarCraft. So like, yeah, great. And then some of them would actually fail as companies and as such have to let go of their teams, which happened to, and I'm trying to recall what it was, STX Seoul. Right? STX Seoul is what the innovation used to be on back when his name was Bogus. And they actually were like a shipping company, I think. And they just literally they were bankrupt. So they ended up leaving. But you had a lot of teams. You had some funny names like KT Fingerboom. It's definitely the most made fun of one. KT versus SKT would probably be the most heavily talked about rivalry. I'm sure there are other ones, but as far as I know, they were the biggest ones, right? Especially because they often had the biggest names in StarCraft 1. So, you know, you get your Flash versus Bisu, for instance, which is exactly what happened here, I believe. Yeah, Bisu versus Flash, ace match. That's pretty epic. That's pretty epic that it went to Game 7 here. So that kind of covers us up till 2010. What else can we actually look at here before I try to wrap this one up? Because we are about over 30 minutes. Yes, we are. Talk about the match fixing scandal. We talk about the beginning of it. We can talk maybe about its transition into StarCraft 2 to kind of end it on a maybe not positive note. But Pro League was kind of still okay. Everything was coming back for Brood War. It didn't seem to matter that StarCraft 2 was the new thing. Koreans still loved Brood War more, and that's still true today. StarCraft 2 comes in and does its thing for 2 years, and then Blizzard looks at the Brood War ecosystem and says, you guys can't do that anymore. And Brood War's like, well, that's not very nice. And then Blizzard says, well, too bad, and forces Pro League, again, the like most prestigious, probably most watched, I'm not sure, league, and the most established esports league that has ever existed up until, I guess, GSL, to swap. Blizzard forced them to add StarCraft 2 initially. and then that would be played alongside Brood War. So it wasn't just a complete changeover initially, but it was stupid. It was stupid. They, I'm trying to try like what Proleague StarCraft 2 2013 might be what I can look up. Maybe. Yeah, I think this might be it. This might be good enough. They had some of the games played as Brood War and some of the games played as StarCraft 2. So you would have people who would obviously like play more of one or the other. And then eventually, as it became clear that Blizzard was going to force basically all of Brood War, all of its scenes moving to StarCraft 2, more players wanted to dedicate more time to StarCraft 2. So the Brood War level was already kind of hurting, and then you see the like inevitability, you see it coming, and then everyone is just like, yeah, whatever, let's just like full-time play StarCraft 2. So very much a dick move by Blizzard. It was definitely very controversial when it happened, just to be clear. The international scene, who are basically all StarCraft 2 fans, were not as upset, but I think even then people were like, well, that's not really cool. But obviously the international Brood War fans and the Korean Brood War fans were very, very upset. I did pause on this because this is amusing. This is STX Seoul, STX Seoul's Classic. There we go. STX Seoul being that company that I was just talking about. And the idea is classic. That is indeed classic. Look at that manly chin. He used to play Terran. He moved to Brood War. He was Brood War, Terran, StarCraft 2 Protoss, which people actually generally agreed upon was the smarter transition. People for the most part, I want to say, did just move to their race. So they were Protoss and Brood War, they moved to Protoss and StarCraft 2, but some did race change. And people generally agreed that the way that Brood War Terran plays was a lot more like how StarCraft 2 Protoss plays. That's a little different nowadays, but it certainly was true back in Heart of the Swarm, which is where this was all going down. So Classic actually did the very correct thing, but he would end up being a cheesy Protoss anyways, funnily enough. But Terran is such a turtle race in Brood War that's why that made sense. Flash would even go on record saying that he kind of regretted not moving over into Protoss from his Brood War Terran. It probably would have been better for him in his transition over into StarCraft 2. So Classic was one of the better ones to move on to StarCraft 2. Here we have SKT1's Fantasy, who I mentioned that order of Terrans. So BoxeR, I Love Uv, Nada, and then Fantasy might be afterwards, honestly, just in terms of the SKT line as well. And Fantasy would be the last OSL champion, I believe. He won the last OSL against Jongbi, I believe. And he had beaten Flash on his way to do that. So it's something that I think deserves a little bit of a nod, because you wouldn't really be faulted for saying, oh, well, Flash was dominating Brood War and still dominates Brood War. I mean, that's basically true, but he wasn't dominating. He had competition, and Fantasy did beat him on his road to winning that last OSL. Oh, the last runner-up. That's right. He didn't win, did he? Of course not. Yeah. Oh, Jongbi was the last winner of the OSL. Fantasy got runner-up, but beat Flash on his way there. So Fantasy, it was really cool. He actually really enjoyed StarCraft 2. He's one of the few players who I think directly admitted to liking StarCraft 2 more than StarCraft 1. I mean, maybe some other people agreed with him, but I feel like saying it out loud is just not a popular move. But yeah, he actually really liked StarCraft 2. And he really liked how Terran played in StarCraft 2. The Terran style in StarCraft 2 fit his Terran style in Brood War more, even though as a race, they were kind of different. I love this map too, so I'm going to spend this last minute before I swear having to finally end the video talking about Arkanoid. Can we just get this map back in the map pool ASAP? This map is so insane. Look at the mini map. Like, well, the mini map's not that bad. Who we actually have. Amazing. Let's actually listen to the commentary for this one. Let's go. Oh, it's Korean commentary. Just kidding. Still, they have the map intros. Look how weird this map is. These are all rocks. You have to break down rocks and more rocks to actually beat your opponent, or go for dropships. So these are the spawn positions. These are the dimensions, and I think this is the map creator. So 1, 5, 7, 11. And since we haven't really watched the production yet, I guess we could also kind of do that. 3-person commentating team, still the standard for Korean esports. You have a color and play-by-play, and then kind of like a host is kind of the gist. Oh.
언제나 T1의 큰 힘, 그 T라는 그런 느낌에 가장 잘 어울리는 선수 중에 하나입니다. 바로 정명훈 선수입니다. 네. 경기 준비 잘.
Damn, we didn't actually have it. I need to show you guys one more thing. I swear, this will eventually end. I swear. Brood War. How about Stark? How about Brood War? Proleague. I'm gonna try and get them cheering. Calm down. Alright, so if you're really new to StarCraft 2, probably in the last 5 or 6 years, you will not know this.
네, 경기 시작됐습니다. 벌써 11시가 남았고요. 먼저 김태형 선수 일정입니다. 이곳에요.
So, what I'm trying to get you guys to listen to is in the background. And there might even be a better version of that in StarCraft 2 Pro League. If I could find it. Maybe I can't. But what they were doing was that they were cheering. And that used to be done even in StarCraft 2. But people don't do it anymore, which is quite unfortunate.
Salut à tous, ici pour les représenter.
Ah, some French guy covering my attempt to find the sounds. All right, so I can't find a really good StarCraft 2 Pro League one. But what they would do is they would count down, right? They'd be like 1, 2, 3, and then they would shout the name of the team or the player before they were introduced or as they were being introduced, either one. So what you heard there was them saying SKT fighting. So it'd be like 1, 2, 3, SKT fighting, and fighting was just kind of, I mean, you can kind of probably get it through the context, right? It's just a cheer. So, and it's the way it's spelled is more like waiting, which is kind of funny, but yeah, it's whatever fighting. So in championships, even in StarCraft 2, let's say it was, I don't know, Huck versus Idra, just for some reason that came to my mind. You would have people who would set up the crowd chants. So it'd be like 1, 2, 3, Idra fighting. And it would be usually a team leader. It's actually pretty interesting, the story of how popular some teams were and how popular some people were, that there were fan clubs. They were legitimate fan clubs. So oftentimes there were a lot of women in those fan clubs, and they would have someone who was designated as like the counter downer, and then everyone else would cheer. So there was someone who was like officially supposed to do this. And then, of course, there were a lot of tournaments where it wasn't anyone official, but they just really loved doing it. So GSL, you would actually get to do it with them up until probably, I want to say 2015. I might have done a fighting chance with someone for one of the Pro League finals. Jin Air versus SKT. I think I was involved in a cheer like that. So I miss it. I do miss it. No one really does it anymore, and especially not in StarCraft 2. But it was a great start, and I kind of wish it would be brought back. But I had to show you that because we're kind of going over it. And it would have happened here too. I just don't think we heard it. So yeah, fighting, and then you actually watch your opponent, your players play, and we can see that Arkanoid is a super weird map where you have a bunch of rocks that topple over. So it's a fun map. But that's going to be it. I think it's going to be it for the video. There are so many more things that happen in Brood War. I had to like cover 1998-ish to 2012, 13-ish. But there you go. If you didn't know any of this, I hope you found it amusing. If you knew everything, then still you found it interesting. I love the history, and I'll probably deep dive into each individual tournament and maybe some of the individual rivalries that were happening too, because there were a lot of epic moments across the history of StarCraft, both 1 and 2. So please like, follow, subscribe, all the good stuff for StarCraft History, and I'll see you guys later for more of whatever StarCraft History I end up doing. Bye.